Welcome back, everyone. As you can see, the Byte 4 is on the bench again. And today we're going to be doing an upgrade to this. We're going to basically push it about to its limit. In fact, actually a bit beyond its specified limits. So we're going to do a few things. We're going to install a SATA SSD, which for the sake of ridiculousness, I have this Intel SSD DC4510. We are going to install an NVMe SSD. Now this is a PCIe 3.0 by 2 device, so I'm not actually endorsing installing any of the drives that I have available as an option for something that I would put in the Byte 4, since they're all going to be pretty bottlenecked by that. And what I mean by that is I'm going to be installing probably this one. I've got my Hynix Gold P31 in a 1 terabyte capacity. I would use the 1 terabyte M13, but we didn't actually publish our data on that yet. So I'm going to put this in here. This is going to be held back fairly well. This is a mainstream drive. I would probably pick like a DRAM-less budget option if I was putting an NVMe drive in the Byte 4, unless I was using it for some very specific purposes. So a combination like this, or even an 8 terabyte QLC drive, something like a Micron, what is that, 5210? You could use this as a very capable little storage server, bond both network interfaces together, have a 2 gig link to the rest of the world, or get a USB-C 5 gig adapter like the one we reviewed from TrendNet, and use this as a cache drive and use this as bulk storage and have 8 to 9 terabytes in this thing, which is great for a portable little server. But if you're just adding storage to it to use it day to day, just a regular old DRAM-less NVMe SSD is going to be perfectly fine. Intel only rates the N4100 for 8 gigs of DDR4. However, I have found it's entirely feasible to install 16. The actual limit seems to be the number of physical individual memory chips that it's addressing. These modules, a single module will boot and will result in a capacity of 8 gigabytes. I even had some limited success booting it with a single 16 gig memory module. However, since I want something that is stable and repeatable to show you, I'm going to be using these 2 Samsung modules I pulled out of my ThinkPad. Last but not least, Azul was nice enough to send over the PoE module. This is actually at Azul's request, and this module adds power over Ethernet capabilities to the Byte 4. Normally this is something that you would have had to request be installed at purchase time, but if you came here after I did this and looking for instructions on how to install it, that is one of the things we're going to be putting in. This is not going to be a performance or anything else video. We will power it on, and I have a panel that I'll lay down on the bench here once we're done and just show that everything's working, and maybe we'll power it via PoE. But I'm not going to run any benchmark numbers. I'm going to leave that for a separate video, since this is basically a how-to at the bequest of Azul. So first step, we got to get into it. The Byte 4 has a bottom plate that's retained by 4 rubber feet, and these just unscrew by hand. And if you just flip it over, off that goes, and you can see that there is a screw template for your 2.5-inch drive. There is also a heatsink placed where the NVMe module will go. Now, normally I would pass up on a manufacturer-included heatsink like that. Some of them just really don't work all that well, and they block airflow to the drive. However, with the Byte 4 not having any internal fans, I'm going to use it because A, it's not going to block any airflow. There's no airflow to block. And B, that NVMe device needs all the cooling it can possibly get. So we're going to start by doing the easy parts. We're going to install the PoE module, which is 2 screws. We're going to install the NVMe SSD, and then we're going to install the RAM. And I'm going to work from left to right. And to do this, I'm using the Warrior 19-in-1 cordless compact screwdriver set from Harbor Freight. This was sent in by Harbor Freight for review, and there will be a link to the video of this in the description below. We need I'm going to say that's probably a number 1 Phillips. So let me just pop that out. That's a number 0. I need 1 step bigger. We're going to use the number 0 because that's actually the right size. So we have 1 screw here. And then if we look, and you have to unplug the SATA cable to do this, which should just wiggle free with a little bit of finger force. There's a second screw right here. And with these out, we'll be able to install the PoE module. You can see that the PoE module has 2 sets of 4 contact pads. Those line up with 2 sets of 4 pins on the main board. There's a screw in the center, which is located towards where the SATA port is. And then there's a screw in the corner towards where the DC power jack is. And this just lines up over the screws, and then with just a little bit of nudging, goes down. And then we can reinstall these screws. And we don't want to over tighten these. Alright, that's it. Our PoE module is installed. I'm going to plug back in the SATA power cable, SATA data cable, so I don't forget. And as you can see, that's a little bit on the tight side to the PoE board, but shouldn't be an issue. Next up, I'm going to spin this around so I can actually see the M2 slot. We're going to install the M2 SSD. Now, one thing I wish is that manufacturers would put their included labels on the bare side of the PCB. They don't have a huge impact on cooling potential, but it's just, I don't know, I don't like it as much. So that's there. You will note that the Azul Byte 4 does not use a standard M2 screw. This is a more conventional drive screw almost. However, with the M2 drive-in, the screw has no problems retaining the drive. There's that. For the memory module, if you've ever installed memory in a laptop, this is exactly the same process. You push out on the little metal tabs, and then the memory module lifts up and then pulls out. And we install our new modules much the same way. Push in at about a 40-degree angle, and then push down. You'll hear a click when they're in place, and I'll stop talking for this one. That's it. Those are in. I'm going to grab some drive screws really quick, as well as the thermal pad that would have been included in this. Alright, now normally all of these accessories were included with the Byte 4. Mine are not, simply because I've been cleaning and didn't want to keep the Byte 4's box around for the sake of having all of those things lay around. The included thermal pads are fairly straightforward. It is a blue pad with 2 layers of protected plastic. go ahead and remove the first layer, place it on the drive. These aren't conductive, so if there's a little overlap with some of the nearby components, like I think it's touching the PCB for the PoE board, that's not the end of the world. It doesn't look clean, but it will work as intended. And then we're very carefully going to pull off the other layer of protective plastic. The drive screws are going to be easiest if installed with the drive in the plate and then plugged in. So you'll have 4 drive screws, and I actually know which ones go to the Byte because they're going to be these black ones with the fine thread, because this is an SSD. And then we're just going to install these. Now, it doesn't make as big of a deal on drives as it would say heatsink, but it is considered best practice when installing screws like this to cross tighten. So we don't just go around the square, we go diagonal and then we go to the other side, tighten this, and then tighten this one. And then for sake of completeness, you go in the same order that you did when you installed them. Just double check that everyone's tight. See? No rattling sound. So, from this point, you're going to flip it over in the installation position, and I'm going to say that it's easiest to plug in the power cable first, and then the data cable. And then you're just going to kind of set it down into the right position. The cables are going to fight with you a little bit. They are stiff, but that's okay. And then I'm very carefully going to start reinstalling the feet. And we're going to do the same thing that we did when we installed the drive. Corner to corner. We're going to do it again. And this is actually one thing that I don't like as much as the older Byte 4, is that the Byte 4 used a foot design. And this is one thing that I don't like as much as the older Byte 3, is the Byte 3 had screws that held the bottom on, the feet weren't the screws. I would have appreciated if they had decided to go with the feet as the screws, that they would have used there's a harder rubber that I've seen a Phillips screw cut into that would have worked for this. So with that all installed, I'm really excited to try the PoE. I don't know if you can see this on camera. It's fairly faint, but the logo lit up. So what I'm going to do now is raise the camera back up. And I don't have my very nice USB-C studio monitor today. I have this Emerson thing. So we're going to go ahead and just plug the VGA in. I wish I had taken this off its stand because it's going to look weird at an angle. And I'm going to hit the power button. And I really wish this thing was brighter. Maybe if I cut the studio light over here. There we go. This is what I get for not having my USB-C studio monitor and leaving it somewhere doing something for a day. Oh, I don't want to do disk check. Sitting here wondering why my keyboard didn't work, I forgot to plug it in. Alright, errors notwithstanding, because, well, the stuff it's throwing errors about simply isn't plugged in. Let's just go ahead and bring up Task Manager and take a gander, and I am at a terrible angle to see any of this. Look at that. "16 gigs of RAM, And let's go ahead and let's do it this way. All right, so it sees the regular SATA drive, however, it doesn't see the NVMe. I'm betting it's simply not formatted because that would be the way I would have left it after benchmarking it. Just gonna flip this up for a second. Yep, it just needed initialized. And would you look at that? One NVMe drive, one SATA drive, and one eMMC drive. So it really is that simple. We upgraded this whole thing in about 20 minutes, and that's with me taking time to hopefully make sure you can see what I'm doing and follow me and explaining some of it. And even with like a 5-minute preamble on what we're doing and why. So there it is. I now have a PoE powered Byte 4 with 16 gigs of RAM and a whopping 5 terabytes worth of storage, 1 terabyte of which is NVMe. So first off, what are we going to do with this at this point? Well, I mentioned when I was reviewing it that there were a few games that just seemed like they needed more RAM or they would benefit dramatically from dual channel memory. We're going to go reevaluate that. Not today. I don't have the monitor that I used for it that day. It wouldn't be an apples to apples comparison. We're going to go back and do that. Next up, I mentioned I was going to try and do some server stuff on it. With 16 gigs of RAM and all that storage, I'm going to fire a Hyper-V and have it do a few things. I might have it do some bare metal stuff as a way ridiculously overpowered OpenSense firewall. I might actually just do that in Hyper-V because that's how I do it for my desk at home. We're going to re-benchmark some stuff. I'm still going to try attaching a 4 amp hour AC adapter to it at some point to see what happens if I give it 30 watts worth of attachments while the CPU is fully loaded. I'm also curious to see what kind of power efficiency I get via PoE, since that's 48 volts DC into it as opposed to 12. I may see less power draw there than I saw with its switching AC adapter. That said, I'm not really going to count on it since PoE has some pretty hefty line losses if you go any significant distance or draw any significant amount of power. I also want to thank Azul. Some of this was actually at their request. They don't have any how-to videos on this, and now they do. And this PoE module hopefully becomes a for-sale component as an individual device at this point, since it wasn't before. I had to ask for one. I really like PoE. That's actually one of the big use cases for something like this. From my point of view, is I can use it for signage and I can run power over Ethernet, and it's fantastic. Because then I just run one cable and I get data and I get power. I use it for phones, I use it for cameras, and now I use it for computers. I love it. I use it for a network switch. I think I've talked about that one. That all said, I want to thank anyone who helps support Pocketables via our Patreon or our Amazon affiliate links or simply by subscribing. It is support like that that helps make videos like this and the connections required for videos like this possible. I also want to thank Electrix for providing our opening and closing themes as always. And finally, thank you for watching.